Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. We're so excited to be here and talk to you about the summer release highlights. Excited to have Andy Schmieken, a long standing presenter, to talk about Flow Orchestrator. So he'll kick things off, and then Brian will talk about Flow, and I will cover all of the other summer highlights. There are over 633 pages worth of release notes. So we'll just start on page 1 when we get there. Just kidding. Part of the Milwaukee leadership, I'm Jen Bowen. You can follow me on Twitter if you aren't already, or you could reach out to me on the community group. Brian is also online as my co-host. We also do have Squire and Jen. I don't think that they're here today, but they co-lead the Milwaukee group. And as most of you know, we alternate between Madison and Milwaukee since we used to be one, and now we are split into 2.
And to be clear, Jen and I are the Madison, not the Milwaukee leadership.
Yes, did I say
You
Milwaukee?
said Milwaukee.
Well, Squire and Jen are Milwaukee. Me and Brian are Madison. Of course, we're all here to succeed. That's really our mission. We want to share information. Like I said, there's so many new features and fun things with summer. We love this topic. We usually have a great turnout. It looks like a lot of people are here today to share and bring awareness to some of the features that hopefully you can leverage. But also, as you know, we all learn together, we all succeed. So that really is our mission. Speaking of which, you can reach out to myself or Brian if you do have anything you'd like to share or present on. We're always looking for presenters. So whether it's Milwaukee or Madison, we will hook you up with the next time we're having a session, and you can definitely talk about the cool things that you're implementing or your best practices or even your failures. We've all been there. I struggled writing a formula yesterday because I got confused between and or. So things like that we can share with each other helps us all. We have lots of community group friends out there. I probably am missing some on this slide, to be honest. But Milwaukee, we have developer group, the Women in Tech group meets quarterly currently. There's a marketing group that they're spinning up. And then of course, Appleton, Green Bay, Neenah. MVP office hours is something else that Squire is a part of, where you can talk with experts, talk with MVPs about your challenges, and they can help provide answers to you or get you connected with someone that can. Salesforce Saturday, we have been on hiatus. It is true. You're not missing out. We haven't been meeting virtually. It's frankly just a little too tough for us. We hope when we open back up in person that you will join us when that kind of comes back around, or we'll let you know if we do hold anything virtual. Myself, I run that, and Andy Schmieken on the call also runs the Salesforce Saturday in Madison. There's also one in Milwaukee that typically Penron has. I've seen them meet a couple times in person, but I'm not usually paying too much attention to when they're meeting currently. Other events, Connections, I think just happened last week, where they were doing a virtual Connections. There's a lot of videos still on demand. And also Trailhead X is coming up on the 23rd virtual, and Dreamforce, I heard that it's going to be very, 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 very limited VIP, pretty much in person, but they will have virtual sessions as well. So be on the lookout for those things. We have all of our community events are linked on our Trailblazer community page on the left-hand side. So feel free to go there for those resources. I left the Trailhead Go app. You can access Trailhead Go, which provides you on your Android or Apple device. It provides you with access to trails, so you can earn badges, but then also it gives you access to the community. So we can all continue to stay connected. If you're waiting at the grocery store line or something like that, that's what I like to do, is peruse Trailhead or check out the community while I am waiting in lines. So feel free to download those apps. Otherwise, I just want to open it up for a minute, ask about any job opportunities, celebrations, or anything else that you guys want to share. Feel free to unmute yourself. Lynette, I know you shared something with us earlier, so I'm going to call on you again. What certification have you recently earned?
I passed the platform app builder certification yesterday morning.
Yay. Did you do it virtually?
I did because nothing in Madison is open yet for in-person testing when I scheduled. So I scheduled early or later half of last month and nothing was open yet. So I had to go virtual because I wanted to get it done and over with before I forgot everything.
You know, I think they closed the Madison one altogether. I don't think they're going to have one anymore. I think there's one up in Green Bay. I don't think they'll have any more in person. I think they shut it down.
Bring it back to MATC.
Yep. Nope. I looked into it recently and they closed the doors on that in person.
Well, that stinks.
I know.
Because in person, you get the little piece of paper and a pencil and you could do a brain dump before you start with all your little notes to yourself, and you can't do that on video.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Jeff?
Jeff.
Yeah, hi, Jeff Serbinsky. Most of you don't know me. I work along with Andy. I'm the public sector account rep. I work mostly with the state. You had mentioned Dreamforce, and so I was just going to add in a few details from our end at Salesforce. Is that it will be in September. You got that right. The new unique thing is that it's going to be multi-city, so not just San Francisco like normal, but also New York, London, and Paris. I think maybe Paris would be fun for me. It will be limited, like you mentioned. They haven't exactly stated how they're going to figure that out. I don't know if I'd use the words VIP, but we're going to try to.
I figure if you get there, you're VIP.
Yeah, we're all VIP, right? But yeah, they're going to figure out some way to do that. I'm not really sure yet, but yeah, obviously it's going to have online components to it as well too. So we're all pretty excited about it. And hopefully some of us here will go. So I just thought I'd throw that info in what we had. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Oh, Tom.
Yes, I've always been a lurker here in this group, working towards my admin certification and stuff, and I've had to put that on the back burner because I've just started a new role at a new company, basically as vice president of sales for a startup that'll hopefully and will most definitely be using Salesforce. So I'll be rolling that out from the ground up as we go forward. So looking forward to using this group for some acumen and maybe some help down the road.
Absolutely. Feel free to post in our community any questions that you have. I mean, there's so much resources that we have just here, but beyond our little community group too. Beverly.
Hi, thanks. I'm actually from the Milwaukee group, but joining because of trying to connect and also the topic. I posted this on the group that a colleague of mine from Management Resource Association, MRA, is looking for a Pardot email specialist. So if you have anybody that is interested, I posted it out and just sharing it out for them. They're wanting to connect with anybody that has either Pardot or is interested in Pardot. So.
Awesome. Sounds good. I should mention I posted also, if you want to work with me, Cerity Partners, we were just in the beginning stages of hiring a new admin. So if that's something that you're interested in too, and you want to put up with me all day, just kidding. Certainly we are looking for someone with high end user engagement, general Salesforce admin skills, emphasis on flows, kind of your normal toolbox, I think, from the admin standpoint. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to me. As I said, I posted it on the community as well. So awesome. With that, then let's talk about some release resources. As I mentioned, there's tons of pages of Salesforce release notes. And yes, I read them all. No, I read the ones that are important to me. You got to know what you want to ignore. For example, I don't read about Marketing Cloud. I don't read about Pardot. I don't read about like high velocity sales because we don't use those products at my company. But there's so many different resources out there available besides this group. You have Release Readiness Live videos. There's a YouTube playlist. There's trails on Trailhead. Of course, the release notes themselves. And the Release Readiness Trailblazer community group. And a reminder to keep your certification, your hard-earned certifications up to date by just going through the maintenance on Trailhead. There's a maintenance schedule out there. We will share these slide deck, by the way. We'll post it on the community shortly after. So then that way you can have access to all these wonderful links that you cannot currently click on as I present. So just wanted to share that with all of you, some of the resources that I use to be successful and get ready for releases. We actually get ours the week early. So we just got summer on the 4th. So typically people get it this next week. All right. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Andy Schmieken, who's going to talk to us about Flow Orchestrator. Let me stop presenting.
Thanks, Jen. Y'all can see my screen.
Good.
And hear me okay, I hope. Good. So thanks everyone. For those of you that don't know me, as Jen said, my name is Andy Schmieken. I'm a solution engineer here at Salesforce. I support our public sector, which means I help state and local governments envision what they can do with Salesforce. And as part of what I have to do and know is all about the technology behind our core products. So one of the things that I was really excited about and excited to learn about was Flow Orchestrator, because I think that Orchestrator is going to be a pretty big game changer for Salesforce. And Flow Orchestrator builds on knowing flow and flows, I guess I should say, and kind of takes it up to the next level. So Orchestrator was announced at Dreamforce last year. And as part of this summer release, it is now officially available in pilot to you as customers. So keep that in mind. It is pilot. I'm going to talk about some things that are either, caveats that don't really work right yet because it's coming, as it moves from pilot to beta, or like I've got some not good best practices that I'll be showing you, and I'll point them out, but just keep in mind that this is pilot. And one of the other things to keep in mind is if you do want to sign up for this, you talk to your AE, they can get you into the pilot program. But we are only adding this to sandboxes. You can't put it into production. So if you want to participate in the pilot, it does have to be even in your sandbox environment. So that's how the pilot is. So if you haven't seen a Salesforce presentation before, you've probably seen our forward-looking statement. Given that this is a pilot product, consider that 99% of everything that I'm saying is forward-looking, and you should not make any purchasing decisions on anything I'm about to tell you, except for 2 slides. So just keep that in mind. I wanted to level set a little bit about why Orchestrator is important, and then we'll get to what it is. And right now, we're talking about automation and Flow Orchestrator because it's exceptionally relevant to organizations. At the top of mind for most of our organizations is how can I make my employees the most productive? And now that the workforce has moved virtually because of COVID-19, labor shortages, it's really important that productivity and maintaining happy employees, making sure that they're actually engaged with things that are the most important for them, are things that companies and organizations accomplish. So how do they do that? Well, they actually use Einstein Automate. And so there's been some confusion, at least with people that I've talked to, about what is Einstein Automate and what is Flow Orchestrator and some of these other tools. And Einstein Automate is simply just a marketing term for this collection of automation capabilities. You know, we have the intelligent workflow stuff with Flow and Omni Studio and bots, or integration capabilities with MuleSoft or platform APIs. And then it's all the little pieces and process components and libraries and pre-built functionality that you can get out of the App Exchange. So if you're seeing the words Einstein Automate, just know that it's really this collection of tools. And we use this collection of individual tools instead of like one giant automation solution, because it allows us to do best of breed based on what you need to accomplish. If you build one giant thing, it doesn't necessarily always work very well. It just covers things, you know, kind of mediocre. So that's why we got all these different tools. So the two things that I did want to talk about that are GA and as part of Einstein Automate is Salesforce Omni Studio. This was actually part of our Velocity acquisition. It is a way for creating a digital experience for both your service people and your customers. And it really is a way to do data intake, like forms processing from your customers, and then run that data across multiple data sources, whether that's Salesforce or something else. It actually has some integration capabilities through what's called a data raptor. Don't want to get too into Omni Studio, but it is being used today in our industry of solutions. It's used in insurance, utilities, and public sector a lot. The other tool that I'm really excited about that's part of Einstein Automate, this came out in March, and it is generally available as MuleSoft Composer. And the reason I'm excited about it is because this is an integration tool for admins. So this is something you all might want to take a look at when you're thinking about integration with other systems. Typically, you know, when we had to do integrations, you and I as admins, we call a developer, we have to call our developer, we have to hire a developer, and we have to write some code to talk to another system. But we no longer need to do that. MuleSoft Composer takes the MuleSoft product and puts kind of an admin declarative interface around it with pre-built workflows and configurations for specific products. Now today, there's actually only 5 products. I believe it is Salesforce to Salesforce, NetSuite, Tableau, Google Sheets, Slack, and Workday. But the next 6 months has a pretty extensive timeline, which includes another additional 25 connectors, including Teams, Asana, SharePoint, Twilio, Snowflake, and a handful of other products that I've seen coming. So this is going to be really powerful for admins to be able to start to do integrations with other systems. All right, so let's talk about why we're really here today, which is about Flow Orchestrator. Many of us know Flow as an extremely powerful automation tool that can run many of our processes. But despite its abilities for things like loops and subflows, for the most part, Flow is kind of just a straight line. I mean, even though this looks like it bounces all over the place, if you were to stretch it all out, it's kind of just a straight line with a single starting point and an end point. So what do we do if we need multiple flows to work together? Well, that's where Flow Orchestrator comes in. It allows you to create these multi-user processes that work across users, across times. A flow orchestration could last minutes, it could last months. So it allows us to really create this orchestration of automated processes. And the goal with Orchestrator is that not only will it have user interactions with screen flows, but it actually will do a lot of automation and integration into other systems besides Salesforce. So this starts to give, and why this is so powerful and game-changing for Salesforce is it does give us process automation across systems and not just Salesforce. And it gives that across people and time as well. So things that you might start to think about that would require an orchestration. Well, anything that involves multiple people to get the work done. Anything that might have parallel work or staged work, something that has to happen after someone else does something, does the first step of the work, or processes where there's 2 people that do, similar work or different work, but it has to happen at the same time. And then things that might involve various service levels and entitlements about, what type of process happens if a service level is hit or an entitlement is reached, can be orchestrated with Orchestrator. So to kind of orient you with Orchestrator, let's talk about the fundamentals. The orchestration builder is based on Flow Builder with just a couple of additional elements added to it. It has steps and it has stages. In our pilot, it is just simply record triggered orchestration. There isn't a way to do auto flows or auto triggered flows. It all has to be triggered by a record right now. As it moves into beta, there's going to be significantly more functionality that comes with it. And this orchestrator is like a service. It's actually always watching all of the flows that it manages and determining where something is at and moving the process forward as it goes on. So this is actually what an orchestration in Flow Builder looks like. You have a number of stages with their steps outlined. This end-to-end process could last several weeks to often several months, and it's all handled by the orchestration engine. So a stage is an organizing concept that just groups related work into logical phases. An orchestration can only be in one of these stages at a time. And the stage has a couple of control things. How do we get into it? It's an entry condition. What must be true for this orchestration to start? And exit conditions. What must be true in order for the orchestra or for the stage to be complete? The stage is really just a wrapper for a bunch of screen flows. And oftentimes in documentation, as you get into this, you'll see it referred to as a step flow. But it's just a regular screen flow at this time. When we talk about a step represents a discrete piece of work or an individual screen flow. So we're going to bring a bunch of screen flows into a stage to complete an orchestration. Steps also have entry and exit conditions, but they also have assignments. Who is responsible for doing that step? The step has a lot of different characteristics, as I talked about. This is what the UI is eventually supposed to look like. It doesn't look like this right now. It's close, but you can see that we've got some ideas about lookups, about how to start the step or assign the step. Right now, a lot of it is just kind of hard coded because, hey, we're in pilot. So you might be wondering, so what does this look like for my users? This is the user experience. There's a new Lightning component that gets put on the page that gives the process, the orchestration, and the actual work that needs to be done. So the top part is the context. The bottom part is the task-specific flow and it's only shown visible to the user it is assigned to. So for my demo here, getting into the admin piece of things, I tried to think of some kind of a process that we could all kind of relate to that wouldn't be too complex. Of course, when we're talking about an orchestration, we are kind of talking about complex business processes. So I'm trying to make a complex business process as simple as possible. So bear with me here. The easiest way for me to lay this out was actually to use not Flow, but Lucidchart, or you could probably use some other flow chart tool. But this has helped me think about how can I design this process, and it also helps me show you how this works. So when we have a new hire record created, so that's a record in Salesforce we're going to kick off this orchestration. And this is all about what is the new hire onboarding process what does it look like? So when we have this new hire record created, we're going to step into the first, I shouldn't use the word step. We're going to move into the first stage, which is the personal info stage. We want the employee to fill out 2 pieces of information, and then we want the HR manager to approve it. Once the HR manager approves, we need to make a decision. Did they actually make the approval or not? And if they do, we move into the second stage, which is the end user gets to select their IT equipment. And again, now we're going to do a parallel process where we have both the IT manager and the HR manager approving the selection. Now your process would probably be much more extensive. That's my simple demo process. So now one of the things that you have to be able to do is pass the data from one of these flows to the next flows. So if you've ever seen when you create variables, a checkbox on that variable that says, can I use this outside of the flow? And it says available for input or available for output. That's what this is for. We need to be able to pass our data between the flows and into each of the different steps of the stage. So I'll show you how you do that, because a lot of people have never really understood what the input and output checkboxes are for in Flow. Any questions so far?
Jeffrey had a question about limits.
Limits?
I'm not sure if he means governor limits or something else. So if you want your question answered, Jeffrey, maybe unmute yourself and ask it.
Yeah, no, yeah, just terms and like limits, like you can only hit, in a flow, you can only have 2,000. I can't think of the word right now.
Records in a collection.
Yes, records in a collection. Are there any sort of limits to the flow orchestration? Is it similar to flow? Is it just gonna be, wide open?
I would assume that all flow limits apply to the orchestration because it is just flows inside of a wrapper essentially. So, but because it's still pilot, none of that stuff is documented that I know of yet.
Thank you.
And Andy, do you want to unmute also and ask your question too?
Yeah, Andy, I was wondering, and this might not be there yet, but do we get to see the running orchestrations and then where they are at any point in time?
Way to steal my thunder. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
We can do that. It's available on the record when the orchestration is running. There will be reporting that becomes available for it because actually all of the orchestration data is being captured in record format. So you should be able to do some pretty basic reporting on it, using reports and dashboards.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? All right. This is Salesforce. I'm logged into Salesforce, set up, and have gone to Flow, the Flow screen here. So what I've done is I've already pre-built all of those 5 steps that I was talking about. And I am using a naming convention for my flows just to keep my steps and my orchestrations straight. So naming convention can be very important here, especially as these get really complex. Just trying to keep some of this straight is going to be a challenge if you don't stick to some kind of naming convention. So let's create a new orchestration to match that process. And all we do is we do that through the new flow button. I'm sorry, I don't want to show you the orchestration quite yet. I wanted to actually pop into one of these existing screen flows. And this is the first, is not the first flow. Hang on, sorry. The first flow is that the end user has to add their personal information. So I wanted to show you that individual flow specifically. It's very straightforward. And if you caught us talking in the beginning of this meeting, Brian was talking about how he's often creating flows with just a handful of elements in them. And this is that same kind of thing here. Very simply, we pick up the record that kicks this off. We have the new hire complete some fields, and then we just go back and update that record. And that's all that we're doing as part of this step. And I mentioned those variables, right? So we have some variables here. We have a record ID that has to be passed into this flow. So that's that available for input. This is kind of like a security mechanism that allows data to come into the flow and for the flow to pass data outside of it. So we're going to pass off the birth date and the preferred first name as output variables. And those go into our next step. So now let's create an orchestration. When we create a new flow, we just go to all templates here and you'll see Orchestrator. And there's 2 ways to launch Orchestrator. We're going to use record triggered because that's all that's available for the pilot. And you see us now in this beautiful auto layout mode because there is no manual layout mode for Orchestrator. You choose how this is kicked off as a record triggered flow. We're going to go with when a record's created, and we're going to run this after the record is saved. And all we have to do is choose which object to watch. So we're going to watch the hire object for when there's a new hire record. And we're just going to run this every time that record is created. Now, I do recommend that you save early, save often. There's not a lot of error checking in the pilot. So if you save early, save often, you may find your errors on your own. This error is just telling me there's nothing in this orchestration. So let's add our first thing. We have the ability to add a stage or a decision element. So we'll select our stage. We'll give it a name, stage 1, personal info. And we choose the processing behavior of how do we get out of this stage. Now you have two options. One, when all the steps are completed, or you can actually add another flow to this that does some very custom logic. Everything we're going to do is step-based. So once the steps are completed, the stage is complete, we move on to the next stage. And now we add a step. So remember, naming convention is important. We're going to call this, I'm just going to call this 1.1 for stage 1, step 1, and call it personal info. Now we add, how do we start this step? So what is the triggering event? Well, it's when the stage starts. The option is when another step completes, or again, we can use Flow to actually write some additional logic about when these steps are triggered. Now we choose which flow that represents this step. And this is the step, add personal information. The next question is, this is the input variable. What are we going to pass into this? Well, it's our record ID. It's the record that kicked this off. I'm actually going to copy that because I'm going to use that a number of times. And then the next question is, how is this step displayed? You can actually display that workflow piece anywhere on any record, as long as you can reference it. So it might not make sense to display it right on the new hire record. Maybe it makes sense on another record. We're going to just use it on that same record ID. So I'm going to just by default put that into every one of these single steps. And now I have to assign this work to somebody. Now eventually there will be lookups here. For now, don't do this in production, hard code who this work gets assigned to. So I'm going to hard code everything to me. I'm going to play the role of the employee, the HR manager, and the IT manager so that you can see all of the steps here. And then there's the exit behavior. Now save that, just make sure I don't have any errors in it. We'll add our second step, which is the HR person approves. So we're going to call it 1.2. We start this step when the previous step completes. Which step is it? It asks us. It's the personal info. And this is the flow that runs the work process for us. So this is HR approves the personal info. And now we're going to pass those input values, which are the outputs from that first step. What did the user select? So now you'll see some new kind of global variables, if you will, of steps and stages when we're picking resources and flows. So I can choose my step 1.1 for personal info and its outputs. And we have a birth date. And again, we should have that step, personal info, outputs, and the preferred first name. So that'll now display that to the HR user. We'll put this on the record, assign it to me, and close that out. And that should match, if we go back to my Lucid chart here, we have personal info stage, the employee fills out some info, HR manager approves. So the next thing we need to do is add a decision element. Real simple. It's a decision element, just like any other flow decision element. We'll call this, yes, they did. And we want to know the output. And again, remember this is beta, so here's why the UI is a little funky here. We want to know the step from the HR approval, the output, whether or not they approved or not. So we'll make sure that that is actually true. We'll just rename our default outcome as a best practice to no, they didn't. We'll close that decision. You can see now we have two paths coming out of our decision. My Lucid chart didn't have anything. If they did not approve it, we're just going to exit. So we're not going to put anything there. But because they did, we need to create another stage. So this is our stage 2, and we'll call this equipment or IT equipment. And this one starts just when the previous stage ends. And now all we need to do is add those next 3 steps. So we'll name this step. This time I'm going to name it 2.1 for step 1. This starts when the parent stage starts. Great. And the flow for this is the step select IT equipment. Displayed on the record. Assign it to me. I know you all are enjoying the typing. 2 more steps to create. This one I'm going to call 2.2 HR equipment approval. And this one we start when another step completes and we select the previous step. Step HR approve IT equipment. And now we're taking those input values again that that the end user selected. So we're going to find our global constant for our steps. And here's where that naming convention really starts to get important. You can see that I have the availability to pull the data from every single step I've already created. So if you aren't naming these very well, it could be kind of confusing. So I want the 2.1 step and their outputs, and I want the laptop. Find my 2.1 step, outputs, and the mobile device. We'll display it on the new hire record again, assign it to me. One more step. I'm also going to name this one 2.2 because this is actually a parallel process. So these two would actually do their work together. So this is an easier way for me to keep track of that. Now when we start the step, we choose which step has to complete first. And again, we're going to select the same starting step as the previous one. It's the equipment selection. We select the flow that runs this. IT approves the IT equipment. And we pass in those same input values from our steps. So we have 2.1, the selecting the equipment, the outputs of it, and the laptop. Our steps 2.1, the output, and the mobile device. We'll display it on the new hire record ID and assign it to me. All right, if I've done everything right, this is going to be amazing. As with any flow, make sure that you activate it. And I think that this should match pretty well with my Lucid chart if we take a quick look here. 2 stages, 2 steps here, an approval process, and then a parallel process with 3 steps on the equipment stage. You just heard me say approval process, by the way. Approval processes are not being retired anytime soon or even really planned to be, but this is going to really give you the advantage to create some very complex approval processes that the current approval builder just doesn't really handle very well. So let's take a look at this orchestration. If I come back to my Lightning experience and create a new hire record, I only have 2 fields on my new hire record, and it's really just a lookup to a contact. So we're going to pick my trailblazer here, John Smith, and save. And what we should see happen over here once this record is created is over here in the right-hand corner, we now have the new work guide. And this is that new Lightning component that shows us the orchestration in process. So at the top of the screen here, we have the orchestration. It tells us we're in stage 1 and what step we're at. And then it's the work process that has to be completed by the employee. So right now I'm pretending to be the employee, and I'll just enter my first name. Maybe I prefer Johnny, and my birth date. For sake of demo, it's today. And so I will go ahead and click next. And because the employee has nothing further to do here, there's no more work items to complete. And they can click done, and you can see there's nothing else to show there. If I refresh the page, now I'm going to pretend I'm the HR manager. I didn't want to create multiple user accounts, by the way, because it just gets confusing. But obviously there's notifications that are going on in the background right here by email. Orchestrator just uses email notifications. It sends them a link to the record where the work is to be done. And you can click it and just go in right here to complete your work. In the future, I'm told by the product manager, we'll use Notification Builder to actually do better notifications than just an email. But right now, it's emails that the work users get. So as the HR manager, I now get the information, and here's that data that got passed from the first flow to the second flow. My preferred first name, my birth date, and now I can choose whether or not to approve it. And Orchestrator's watching right now. It's paying attention as to where we are in this entire work process. And that's this link right here. So when I click that, it's going to open up a new tab with this orchestration record. You can see an orchestration instance itself has a status, it's in progress. And when I click on related here, I can see all of the steps, the stages, the steps that have been completed or are in progress, and the stages that it's in. I don't see what's to come because I don't necessarily know what's to come. Based off of what's going to be completed in this information, I may or may not go to certain steps or different stages. So that's why you can't see what's future. I can only see what's present in this orchestration. So I can see that we are currently in stage 1. We've completed one of the steps, and the other one is in progress. It's been presented to the user. And then I have the the entire orchestration history is available to me as well. I'll show you that history in detail in just a minute. So back on our new hire record, I'm going to go ahead and approve, finish out this first stage. Orchestrator goes and looks at, makes that decision. Did the HR manager approve or not? So now I'm going to refresh, be the employee. I have to choose my equipment, my IT equipment. I want a Mac and I want an iPhone. Finish that. We'll refresh, and now the IT manager is going to get another notification, or HR manager, I'm sorry, to fill this out. Now, because I'm both people and this is a parallel process, you'll actually see that it's actually going to tell me that once I complete this work step, I have another work step to do. So I'm going to approve the equipment here. It tells me I have one more work item. I'm going to do that one as well, approve it, and now our work is complete. Nothing more to do. So if we come back to our orchestration instance and refresh, now you can see all of the steps and stages that I've gone through. You can see all 5 of those steps were completed, the stages that it went through. And if we do look at the flow history, the orchestration history, you can see not only the steps that it went through, when it started and when it ended. You can see who did it and how long it took as well. So you can see that the entire instance, that we went through this in 209 seconds. So this starts to give you some really great capabilities about measuring how long it takes to even do work and providing maybe some optimization opportunities there for you. So that is Flow Orchestrator right now, how it works and what it's available to do for you. I'm open for more questions. And if you want to get signed up, you need to contact your AE. They can put you in the pilot program, get you signing some documents, and off you go with working on Orchestrator. Brian Kwong.
Andy, do you know after this is generally released if this is going to be included with our license price or not?
I don't know. I've asked like 100 times, and the only thing is that I keep hearing is it to be determined. So I can't speculate whether or not it's part of your core licensing, whether it's available to platform users, all users, UE or EE, or pay us $100 an orchestration or what?
Translation, contact your account executive.
Yeah, well, they don't know either. So
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you know if there is any plans or is it on the roadmap to do queues or groups in terms of who you hit with the approvals?
yeah, if we go back to one of my slides here, there's definitely this idea of being able to do more and better lookups of who it gets assigned to. So right now, of course, like I said, it's hard coded. Don't hard code anything in Flow, as most of us should know. But eventually there'll be these lookups, or you could be using a variable. So you could assign it to a queue, just as like you said. One of the things that I don't know about, and I meant to ask and I forgot all about, was whether or not you could assign steps to community or Experience Cloud users. So if you're an Experience Cloud customer, that could actually be really powerful to have this back and forth orchestration between internal steps and external steps. So I don't know that one yet.
I think you can. Don't quote me on this, but I remember watching the release readiness, and they had a very similar process to yours, but they put it on a Experience Cloud because the new employees didn't have logins yet, and they needed to be able to like set their preferred information. So I think you can, but or at least that's where they're going towards.
Right. That would be great. That would absolutely be great. The other thing that we didn't talk about and can't really show today is time-based, and time is something that is really important to these complex orchestrations. So that's all coming as it moves into beta, is to have the time-based functionality that like this first top, pick list or interface shows.
Andy, if there are multiple different orchestrations running and entering the same user to the same step, does it look pretty much like it did here, where you had two steps concurrently? You hit done and it just tells you, hey, there's one more item, and then it shows it?
Yep. Yeah, you can be running multiple orchestrations at a time. There's not anything preventing you from doing that. Architecturally, that might not be the best UI or user experience, but yeah, you could definitely do that, and it would just continue to show you the work that needs to be completed. I don't know if it's going to show you first in, first out kind of work. I haven't tested that. I could create another orchestration and see what it shows you. But
I was just thinking, like, if we get this to use to replace approval process, you could have your screen full that has all the information about the record that you want, and just give people one place to go to for all the approvals, and just go through the queue of first, do the first one, go to the next, get constantly loaded to you through all the records.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking, let's make a second one really quick.
We might be tight on time.
That's
just
fine.
FYI. So
I'll do it while you guys are presenting.
okay. Joanne had a question too, and she was asking in the chat, does Flow Orchestrator lock the original record when the approval process is in process until it's approved or declined? So we're used to seeing record locks happen, I think, Joanne, with the normal out of the box kind of approval. Any insight there, Andy?
So record locks are not something, or I should say, this isn't the approval process like replacement. And I've heard Alex Edelstein, who's the product manager for all of Flow, actually all of Einstein Automate now, use the term like legacy approval processes. That's not, it's not we're not getting rid of the current approval process thing, and so locks are part of that. So if you want to actually lock a record outside of an approval process, there is actually something on unofficialsf.com that you can add to a flow that will do that. So you could, conceivably actually create one of these first steps to have that, have it lock the record before it moves into this, or as it moves into this orchestration. And then you could unlock it in different places as well. So that's the only way that you can do record locks is kind of with that unofficial add-on to Flow. Unless Brian, you've got some other thought on it.
Yeah, actually, we cannot use the approval process in our org because we can't have the records locked. So this would definitely work better for us.
Is through an approval process, do you have to? Yeah, I don't think you have to enforce a record lock during an approval. Do
If
you?
the approval process is in progress, it's locked.
Ah.
Uh,
Unless
somebody has a way of unlocking it, that would be awesome.
Apex.
Yeah. Okay. Not that.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
It's been a long time since I've worked with approval. I haven't written a approval process in a long time. Awesome.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. This was a great insight into this pilot. I look forward to seeing more with Flow Orchestrator. I'm sure that we'll have you back to present once we know more about it and we have more features and capability. Also, I want to say thank you because my brother's name is Johnny and today is his actual birthday. And you reminded me to send him a quick text.
You're welcome.
Okay, awesome. So I think with that, then, Brian, did you want to talk about Flow, which is part of our current licenses? Yes. Awesome.
Yes. And I'm going to apologize now. We're in a transition with my wife is heading off to work and my kids are supposedly in school. So if you hear me pausing and yelling randomly, that's because I get to play warden right now. Okay. So for those who don't know, hi, I'm Brian. Okay. There's a bunch of Flow stuff in this release. A lot of Flow stuff. And a lot of it is what I would consider kind of like quality of life items. And in the march to getting from, hey, we have process builder to now we can do everything in Flow. And there's some things that are just nice for people who've been building flows for ages, who've maybe been frustrated with some things. I'm going to start off with betas. So there are 4 betas in this release with flows. One of them is that schedule paths are now available in the auto layout, which the auto layout itself is a beta. And this really just means that you get to have multiple pathways coming from your start element if you're using the auto layout, which is great for those folks who've been using auto layout. I'm not going to demo it because it's literally what we have in the screenshot here. I am going to demo 2 different things, which is having record fields directly on the screens, as well as being able to debug with the auto layout on. But I'm going to do all my demos all at once because most of these things are really quick to demo. And I don't think it makes a lot of sense to be pinging back and forth between slides and Chrome. The last one is the canvas is really large. So if you're using auto layout and you have some really, really, really big flows, you may have noticed a space problem. Now it's increased the space by 5. Which I really don't have contextually how much bigger that is, but it must be big because it's it's 5 times. That's always large. That I'm also not going to demo because I have no idea how I would demo something based on size. Andy, you may have some brilliant ideas somewhere down the line, but I don't. All right. Next, 2 things involving is change. So in the spring release, we had record trigger flows and you couldn't use is change in your start element. So if you had a situation where you wanted to say, I want this automation to occur when this particular field changed, the way you would have to do it is always have it fire and then do a decision that says, look at the prior value of the record and see if it is the same as the current value and then do stuff. We don't have to do that now. You can use is change as an operator directly within the start as well as in decisions. Also added in the formulas is things like is new and prior value. And that's actually really nice if you are trying to get away from having to write process builder and you need to have a flow that does runs on creation and runs on update, but you have different actions if it's a brand new record versus if it's an updated record. Is new just wasn't an option, and now it is. All right, starting the list of things we'll be demoing. Pick lists and just choice options. And I'm about to yell at my children who are not following directions. Is that you can actually set a default value really easily now in Flow. Beforehand, it was a whole rigmarole. And if you were using a pick list, there was no none option. You had to create your own, and it was kind of a mess. You're also able to switch choice components. And so if you're like some Flow builders who go, oh, I'm going to start with a pick list and go, oh, this is really terrible, I should use a radio button instead. Oh, no, you know, I really don't like this, I'm going to use that instead. You would have to recreate the item on the screen multiple times every time you wanted to change what type of choice component you're going to display. And now you can just switch back and forth, and I'll show that as well. Pick list requirements. Trying to make a pick list field required on a screen flow was kind of a pain. Now it's literally just check a box. One thing that I am really looking forward to is multi-column. This is something that I believe was beta in spring and is now generally going to be available. And that is literally to be able to have more than one column within your screens. Prior to summer, you basically had one column of your screen flow, and that's it. And that made doing certain layouts or ease of use of seeing similarly named fields going across the top, going across the screen, difficult. This way we can actually use the entire space. And I tried really hard to break multi-column and I couldn't do it. So I'm excited for that. Then there's a new element called sort and limit data, which is a collection element that lets us sort and limit data within a collection. It's somewhat self-explanatory, but it's kind of nifty what it can do, and we'll take a look at it. I'm not going to demo it because we have the nice little fairly bad resolution black and gray eye on the screen, and that's going to show up on any of your screen components where you've added conditional visibility. So we've had conditional visibility in screen flows for now for a number of releases where we can say only show this component based on some sort of criteria. And you would have to click into each component and see was conditional visibility put into that component or not. Now, if it's there, you'll get the little eye on the screen preview, so you know without having to click through it which ones are conditional, which ones aren't. Then there's a funky limit, and I'm gonna go on a limb and guess that for most of this is not gonna apply to us either, because we don't look at the log entries, or we're not running that many flows that we're getting that many log entries. But there's now a new limit, which is like 75,000 in an hour. And that's on top of the limit that I believe is 7 million for a day. And that's just the log, kind of like a debug log entry. For most of us, you're never going to notice it. I didn't even realize there was a 7 million limit until I saw this release notes. One nice thing, and this is kind of quality of life, if you have fields that are read only, like system fields like created date or last modified date, they can get permanently filtered so you don't see them when you're building your flow. And that can be really nice when you are working and you're not 100% sure what's edible and what's not, and you just are dealing with a long list. Children.
Fine.
1 second.
It's it's not too bad.
Okay.
You forgot to raise your fist.
They can't see me, so it doesn't matter. It's the downside of having an open plan. All right. The last thing before I get into the demo, and this is things that I'm really excited about, is some improvement with debugging. One of the big things for me is we can now debug record triggered flows. So for those of us who have been trying to move away from Process Builder and building a lot of record triggered flows, meaning the flow is fired when a record gets created or updated or deleted, now we can debug those items. Beforehand, you were basically doing what I call functional tests, where you literally go create or update a record and see what happens to your flow. Now we don't have to do that. We can also debug after the pause items in Flow. That was also something that we just couldn't do. Lucian, Elliot, get away from each other now, Amelia. Go to a different room. Hi. We can also see things where if we're doing auto launch or scheduled flows, and auto launch are things that are not record launch or record triggered flows, we can see what record changes actually got transmitted versus rolled back if that flow failed. Then we have this really neat place for looking at all the failed flows. So if you have flows running in your system and you have a number of them that are failing, you will actually see them in a list view in a new area and setup that's been named paused and failed flows, which can be really nice if you have a bunch of things that happen and you're out of the office. Instead of having to go through an email queue, you have kind of the log list directly in setup that you can go through and take a look and see what's happening in each one. This is more of a kind of a quality of life. Speaking of those email errors that we would get if a flow fails, instead of using the API name, you'll now get the version label. So if you are doing a save, a new version, and you change that name a little bit, it will give you that label name versus the API name, which can make it a lot easier to know what failed or which flow failed and specifically what version of that flow failed. So if you were testing things in production or you were making things live and you were switching versions and one was failing and one wasn't, you will be able to know which one because it will be included in the name. Okay, enough of slides. Let's do demo. And so I'm going to be demoing a bunch of stuff kind of like all over the place. But this is a really simple flow that I have. I'm just grabbing some opportunities. I am going to some screens. So I'm going to start with being able to pull fields from a record directly into a screen. Now, this is, again, something that's beta. But before we had this as an option, what we would have to do is essentially grab the record and then create output or display text values on here and then set the default for that value to your record, which was a really, really clunky way of doing it. Now I can go and select a single record variable that I have. So I have only one, which is my opportunity. And I get my list of fields. So I can say, I'm going to have my name for my opportunity here. And I'm going to have my description. And I can see it show up on the screen. And right now it's blank. But if I run this flow, it will fill in with whatever value is currently in that field from the record. So I'm going to go click done. And then draw the little line here. And we'll come back to that in a second. Let's see. I cheated. I put my wonderful list of things that I'm demoing right here. So we're going to go back into a different screen. And this has to do with showing things that are required. First, it's just a checkbox, and now this pick list is required. I don't have to do anything special. The other thing that we have is setting default values. So you notice right now it says -- none, just like we were looking at a pick list on a regular record. And that's new. If we were doing this prior to summer, what that would be filled in with would be the very first choice option that we have specified. And you can imagine if you wanted a pick list that was required, that's kind of not helpful because it's always filled in. And this way it starts off as essentially blank. And so the required checkbox actually means something that they have to make a change from none to something else. But if I wanted to set a default value other than this none, all I would have to do is go through and pick my choice down here in default value. It will let you pick a choice on something that is not listed as the potential choices here. And you can look at the release notes. It goes through a whole bunch of logical conditions of what will happen based on what you selected there. But you can see I selected Batman as my default, and it automatically changed to Batman in the preview. But if I change my mind and said pick list is great, but I want that rather have radio buttons, instead of having to go and add a radio button and rebuild my choices, I can just come to the component type and flip this out and go, what looks nicer? Do I like this or do I want that? Which this is more quality of life. I can't tell you how many times I've switched back and forth between these just for fun. But let's go do a multi-column because multi-columns are cool. And that is going to be a special section off to the left called section. So in this particular scenario, I have a series of questions I want to ask it, and I don't want them necessarily right down the line. So instead, I'm going to use a multi-column, and I'm going to add my 3 columns. So right now I have 1 column, and it takes the full width, and I'm just going to click Add Column, and you'll notice that it automatically defines the width for me. And what's really nice is I can make changes, and it automatically changes the other items. So as I go through and say, hey, I want this smaller, it will go, okay, then one of these will be bigger. I tried really, really hard to break this, and I couldn't break it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, and now that I have my separate columns, I'm going to go put my question to say, hey, what's my quest? What's my favorite color? What's the airspeed, velocity of an unladen swallow? And now I have that nice, compact, neat in the section versus having the increased length of my screen, which is pretty cool. The other thing I wanted to show you when it comes to setting default values, if it's a multi-select, like a checkbox group, you can have it automatically select multiple different values, and it's separated by a semicolon. And the default value doesn't have to be a choice value. I could hand type a default in there, and it would be perfectly acceptable. Everything I have is basically choices, so I just went with the choices. And I'm going to go ahead and click Done. So there's my updated screen, and I'm going to come back and see what did I miss. We did the default value, we did the switch choice, required sort and limit data. That's what I need to do. So we have this collection sort, which is under logic. I'm going to add it underneath. I'm going to very imaginatively call it sort and limit. And this will work for collections. So this is something that will work after you've gotten all the records. So I have an get records that just gets all my accounts. And now I can say, I want to sort by a specific field. And let's go with phone number. And then I can go through and make other choices. Like I can go through and say, I'm going to sort by second field. So I want everything by phone number and then website. And then I want to sort by third one, and let's call it billing country. But in this one, I'm going to put the nose first, and I'm going to make those descending. So I can have up to 3 different ways I can sort my collection after I've gotten the records. And then once I've done this, I can choose if I want to remove any number of records after my collection. So I would do my sort, and then I can say, hey, after I've done all that sorting, I only want to keep the first 5 in that list. And then it will grab the first 5, and then anything after the 5 will be removed from the collection. This can be really helpful if you're trying to do something along the lines of, I want to know across all these records, what is the record with the highest value, like the highest dollar value or the most recent date. You could sort it and then just grab the first record off the top. And I would connect it through, and then I would do some other stuff. But that's all well and good, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to debug this. Chugga, chugga, chugga. because this is a record triggered flow. Or no, this is a screen flow, so that doesn't matter. So this won't actually show anything. I'm on the wrong flow. I want to do this flow. So this is my record trigger flow. And this record trigger flow really only needed one element, which is this update record. But I needed something to actually show the progression of the debug because it's really cool. So I created a whole bunch of really, really terrible items. So all this is basically, this assignment does nothing. My song decision literally is just a decision that says, take a look at the phone number, and if it's this phone number, then that's one pathway. Otherwise, it's the other outcome. I have a couple other assignments that, again, do nothing because at the very end, all I'm really doing is updating the account with some information. So I have an actual account out here that I have called Jenny, I Got Your Number. It's got a phone number in it. There's nothing else that's in here. And this is what I'm going to use in my debug. So what's really cool about this is you used to have to specify an input variable, like have a record ID that you could input, a variable that you can reference for input, which meant that we couldn't use anything that took a full record. That's a Jenny's number, Andy. I don't think it's the Jenny's number. She probably changed it regardless of what Tommy asked for. So I'm going to go ahead and hit debug. We got a couple of options. We can run this as a different user. We can skip the condition requirements. So if you wanted to use a record that maybe didn't have the same criteria that's in your start, you can skip it. But the big thing here is we can search for the record that launched. And you can see we have a whole bunch of things that showed up. But I want to use this one. And I'll click run. And we can see the path that this record took and what happened. And I then, on the sidebar, I can go down the list and I can go through and say, this is what happened. It's hit the start. It did an assignment that doesn't actually do anything. It made a decision. It told me what the conditions were of that decision. And I said, if the record phone was this, it equals that, which it does. And I had my other assignment, which really doesn't do anything. And then I had my phone mysteriously go off despite the fact that it's on mute. And there we go. And then we had the actual update, which went through and set the value of the account number to be Tommy Two-Tone, put in the description, which was a really long list of lyrics from the song. And then I can see that it rolled back the changes because we're in debug. It didn't actually make the change to the record in reality. So if you're one of those people who likes to test in production, you can now test it in production without the actual changes going through into your records. And then if I want, we have some other information that I can use with this options where I can show the governor limits and any transaction boundaries. Come on. Which I don't really have anything here, so it's not going to show much. But it will show things like how many SOCL queries do you have. So this is nice because we're in auto layout. We can do the wonderful debug. And then I'm going to try to do the run. I haven't actually tested this. We'll try running the debug even though I don't have any inputs. And we'll see what works. So here's my wonderful debug. So here's my opportunity name and the description that came over. And when I hit next, I can see here's my pick list that I have. And this is what my new multi-column looks like. I gotta pick the correct one. All right. That's what I have for Flow. Anyone have questions?
Can we add borders to the columns?
Can you add borders to the columns? No, not yet. There's really no option here to set borders. You do get conditional visibility, which is for the entirety of the column. Or I guess I should say the entirety of the section.
There are some ways that you can hack the CSS, but not
Not really worth it.
Yeah, doesn't that require you to embed it into a Visualforce page?
I don't remember.
Or maybe a custom lighting component?
Could be. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it looks pretty decent even without it, because there's really not any borders anywhere else. But you know, a great place for that feedback would be ideas at salesforce.com, or ideas period salesforce.com.
So just real quick, we were scheduled to go to 2:30. We're obviously going to run over if everyone can stay. Brian, can you stay?
Child dependent, yes.
Okay. Because obviously we put a lot of work into these presentations. I should know better that we should go to 3 when we do. Remind me next time, Brian, when we do releases. Angela asked a good question though in the chat. There are many e-form programs out there like FormStack, FormAssembly, and so on and so forth. Can we use ScreenFlow in place of one of those third-party programs? I'll kind of answer this and say it depends. It depends on what you're trying to do with it, Angela. So ScreenFlows are great if you are collecting information internally about records. They are great for if you're using a community. You can embed them on some websites, I believe, too, but I'm not that familiar with that.
It depends on what you want to have in your form, because you have to deal with permission means if it's outside of your Salesforce environment. If it's outside of the community, you have to make sure that if you're using any components that are lightning required, that you are using what's called lightning out to get them to actually run. Because if you just embedded this in a form and then made it accessible publicly outside of a community, it's not in lightning by default. So the short answer is yes, but yes. In the recording, we will post the recording on the community page along with the PowerPoint. It might take a little bit longer, but it'll be out there this week.
There's also a specific release readiness video on all of this too. So I would definitely encourage checking that out as well. Any other questions though for Brian? Oh, Andy, that's a good tip. You can put or display pictures in one of your multi-column cells too, which can be useful sometimes. Yes, especially if you're dealing with like products and you want to have a picture of your products and things like that. Display image, that's super nice. Cool. So many different things. I can't wait to hear more about what you guys do with the multi-columns.
It sounds like a really great presentation to the user group, Chad.
It does, actually.
I've already put in a request to be able to embed a multi-column inside a multi-column.
Oh, the
column
CSS.
All the things. All right. Well, I will present my side then. So I am covering all the other things with the summer release. Now, again, keep in mind, we really focus on core platform here. So I'm not going over everything. And anything where you see the little cloudy goat, we're going to be demoing. And we'll take a look at some slides too. Some more general stuff I want to talk about is multi-factor authentication. There are a ton of resources for this. Please remember that multi-factor authentication, we had done previous presentations on it. We've been talking about it. We will continue to talk about it. The deadline is February 1st of 2022. Ton of resources for enabling it. Enabling it is not so much, I think, the problem. Brian, I know we talked earlier today and had lots of tips and things to think about when you're doing multi-factor authentication and when you're enabling it, because there's so much more to think about other than just turning it on and enabling. So Brian, did you want to speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, well, really quickly for time's sake, when, like Jen said, enabling it is easy. Getting it rolled out to your users may be a little bit more challenging, but enabling it and implementing it is easy. the challenges that you have to think about are, how are you using Salesforce and the users and anyone that you're interacting with. So for example, if you have a consultant and they do not have their own user in your org, for example, they're sharing your user, then multi-factor authentication is going to require you to prove their access when they access your user. Now, you can put their IPs in your network access, which will mean that they will be required to do multi-factor authentication the first time they access the org, and then as long as the IP doesn't change for the consultant, they should be able to use it going forward. But you need to plan for that. The other thing that you need to plan for are things like you are an admin who is doing testing or debugging because a user is having a problem, and you want to log in as that user using the login as feature. Multi-factor authentication is going to hit you there too. So if the user you are trying to help isn't available to approve your access to their user, you're not going to be able to log in because you're going to be blocked by the multi-factor or authentication. If you're working with ISVs and you need to grant them access to your user, you have the same issue that you're going to end up having to make sure that you're available to give them authorized access through your MFA methodology. And the thing to think about is how easy that is really dependent upon what you use. If you're using the Authenticator app for Salesforce on your phone, then it's not too challenging because you just, oh, here's the authentication. Yes, I know I'm working with ISV, they're trying to connect, hit approve. But if for some reason you aren't using that and you're using a physical key instead, that physical key has to be at the location or the computer that is being accessed at the time of multi-factor authentication. So if you're going to be working with a group of consultants or you're working with an ISV and you're not using the Authenticator app, you got to figure out how you're going to handle that in order to make sure that they're able to get in and do things. So
And a couple of questions are coming through kind of the chat here. Does MFA impact Experience Cloud? I honestly don't know. I don't know. No.
Andy's shaking his head
That's
no.
Community Cloud, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Previously
don't think it
known as.
does. I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then Marie asked, if we use SSO with MFA external with Salesforce already, are we required to do this, or is there a skip option? I know that you can use things other than like the Salesforce native, app to do the multi-factor authentication. I think you can use, we use Duo, for example. There's Google Authenticator, all these different other ones. So I don't know how
I remember reading that we had to.
Yeah. Okay.
We set up the MFA through Azure though with Microsoft because we already had the SSO through that. So it was more on, I threw it on IT, which was nice.
You're required to have multi-factor authentication, whether that comes through your SSO provider or you want to use your Salesforce authentication.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the big thing, the big takeaway is you need to plan on how you're going to roll this out, but you also need to have a plan how you're going to manage it going forward. Because if you're using integration users, MFA is going to be an issue with that. You're going to have someone who's able to authenticate for the integration at least that one time. And let's say it's you as an admin, and then you decide, you know what, I really want to join Jen Bowen at her place, so I'm going to quit my job and go over there. How is you going to transfer the MFA from you to whoever is going to take it over next? There are ways to do it. It is not necessarily this big unsurmountable hurdle, but you need to plan and have a process in place. So when it is something that needs to happen, you know what you need to do. You're not scrambling at the last moment to say, okay, we're going to have to reset it and remove it from this person and then re-add it and do whatever.
And there is a lot of resources, again, like check out there's a dedicated Trailblazer community group. So for all your specific questions, I would definitely go there. And like Brian said, just plan. as we lead up to the deadline.
Just
Okay.
confirming that the main thing really is any shared logins, right?
Shared logins, integrations,
Login as user.
login as user.
And then, you know, you may have to have situations where, unless your company is providing the cell phone, whether or not your employees are going to want to put a company app on their phone, or if you have people who don't have smartphones. Like, I actually have people who still use flip phones. I'm sorry, Salesforce Authenticator app won't work from those. So you're going to need to do the what
Key
Andy's
fob.
showing,
Andy's got
have
the
a key
fob.
fob. But you need to know that ahead of time, because if you turn on an MFA and then you have suddenly this influx of people who are having issues because they don't have a cell phone that is going to support the app, you need to have a process in place so that key fob is in the hands of the users when they need it, not, you know, how many days it's going to take you because we're not all in the office, or you're a company that's spread across the country normally anyways.
And Jason, you just posted in the chat that you had MFA on and you were able to log in as a user, as the admin, and not have an issue. That is what we were talking about. I don't know.
It would be if the MFA is the MFA on the user that you're accessing.
You should still be able to do login as user even if MFA is turned on without.
Yes, I had it across the org and I was still able to use that feature.
Yeah, I haven't had an issue and I haven't
good.
enabled.
That's interesting, because that goes against all the reports I've been hearing.
Good.
But
You've
it
heard
might
it
be
here
because-
first.
I'd be interested in knowing your circumstances. Do you have your IP address whitelisted? Or, I'm sorry, allowed list on your network access?
I don't know what my IPs are off the top of my head.
It was
Again,
at my last org and I don't recall
yeah.
that. But yeah, I still was able to use that feature. I don't think I could live without it.
I couldn't, that's for sure. Okay, so I've got a lot more to cover, but certainly, again, if you have more questions, post it in the success community. As we hear more, I mean, we do have a year yet, but as we hear more, we'll definitely be sharing it. So we'll keep this topic alive. The other thing I want to mention is the Your Account app, which actually allows you to manage your products, licenses, your contract for your org, and allows you to get support. What I love about the Your Account app is my typo on the slide, but also you can, if you're joining a new org or your AE changes and you don't remember who it is, it's actually going to be listed right there who your contact person is, which is super nice. It is automatically enabled for the system admin, so you can access it through the little gear icon underneath your account. But if you want to extend that to anyone else, maybe you have a CEO or someone else that needs to be able to access this information regarding your details, there is a manage billing permission that you can assign to them and then extend that access. I'm skipping around a little bit here, but I want to get through my slides first and then we'll dive into the demo thing. So the other thing that's really exciting, and I wish I could have demoed this for you today, but reports allow for inline editing. It's a beta feature. You first have to contact support, which I did immediately once we got our release. Interestingly enough, they pushed back on me and said that they would only enable it in a sandbox first before they would enable it in my production org. I thought that that was interesting because underneath the reports and dashboard user interface here, there is an enable inline editing for reports, which you can toggle on and off. So I thought, well, if I had an issue, I would toggle it off, or I would start with it toggled off, and then I'd spin up my new sandbox, and then my sandbox would have it available to me. They pushed back, totally understand. They enabled it in my sandbox org. I just got that enabled today, so I wasn't able to play with it. But it's only available for certain types of data. So text, numeric checkbox fields you can do the inline editing for. This is a very fuzzy screenshot of what it looks like. I did learn that you can, well, you have the little pencil icon like we are used to with our inline editing with list views, and then there'll be a little lock box or a little lock on there if you cannot edit it as you hover over. It is not currently, because it's in beta, there are some limitations. Like I mentioned, it's only available for certain types of fields. And also you can't do mass inline editing. It's one at a time. So if I wanted to go through and update my stage for a bunch of my opportunities, I'd have to do it one by one, click save each and every time. But
I did not know that. That's actually a bummer, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, I would think so, but test it out. Like I said, it's beta, so I'm sure that they're probably working towards that, since we can do that with list views. I would assume we could do it here too. My other concern with it, I guess, is on page layouts, especially on dynamic forms. We use this where if there's a certain value on a dynamic form or a field on a dynamic form that we set, we can then use the dynamic components and fields to make fields like read only once it's populated with information. But that's not going to translate, I don't think, to reports. So they might not be able to edit it on the dynamic form page, but I'm wondering they're probably still going to be able to edit it on the report. So that's one thing that
Just like they could edit it from a list view.
Just like, well, that's right. Right. Yep. Yeah. So something to just be mindful of when we talk about making fields read only on the page layout. Now users, if they're crafty, they can get to it in other ways. Let's see. I am going to skip this next one and go to record access and sharing and permissions. Something that I thought was really cool is that we can now see a sharing hierarchy. Previously, we were able to add manual sharing in the last release on records. So we brought that from Classic into Lightning, which is super exciting. And now this release, they allow us to actually see sharing from a record called this share hierarchy. Remember, you have to add this button to your page layouts and your Lightning pages in order to be able to use it. But it's pretty cool because if you want to know why someone has access, or maybe why someone doesn't have access, why they aren't listed, or if they are listed, you can use that button to then see the reason for their access. I did a little bit of testing with this, not a lot. We don't use manual sharing currently. But one thing that I found really interesting is some of the reasons for access was a little bit misleading. For example, reason for access administrator. I have a couple people that aren't administrators, but they have modify all data. And I wonder if that tagged them as an administrator. I'm not quite sure, but just something to take a look at and learn exactly all of those different reasons for access, what they mean as you, utilize this tool. I don't have all the answers, but I did like how it had the group membership in there, so I could see what groups are being shared with this record and things like that I thought was kind of cool, being able to see quickly with a click of a button. The other one I want to talk about is restriction rules. Restriction rules are beta. So again, there's some restrictions with our restriction rules. It's available for any kind of custom objects, contracts, tasks, and events. That's it currently. What was really interesting for this, I actually copied and pasted this straight from the release notes because I haven't had a chance to get hands-on with it too much yet. But for example, there is, when is this available, right? So there's actually a timeline that they're rolling this out for. So we don't all have it enabled just with the release. There's a timeline that's published currently on the Restriction Ruled Trailblazer community group. So if this is something that you're interested in and you don't have it yet, you might want to take a look at the timeline to see when you are going to be getting it. Part of the reason why I haven't gotten hands-on quite yet. What this really does is it allows for another layer of access control on top of kind of our existing sharing settings to kind of let us configure truly private visibility. So for example, we can set tasks and events as private in our org-wide default, but for people who have access to that object, they can still see the record details, they can still see that timeline, and maybe that's not appropriate. So restriction rules kind of help making that configuration a little bit more possible to lock that down completely. And if you need to, the other thing that I wasn't quite sure on is how we can use this, because according to the release notes, it says through the tooling or metadata API is how you control it. I didn't really see that there's a declarative way to do it, I guess. So more to come on that. Hopefully they provide that, but it definitely is something to kind of look at if you're concerned about visibility and you need to lock some things more down. So check out the restriction rules developer guide for any more information there. I agree. I think that just someone posted in the chat, it's going to get tricky to troubleshoot restrictions. Why doesn't the user see this? Yes, absolutely. I think that the more and more complicated our sharing and permissions has become with groups, with restriction rules, with muting permissions, it is getting more and more tricky. It no longer is the day that the org-wide defaults were kind of the controller of everything, and then building on top of that, it is getting definitely much more complicated.
I mean, Jen, I look at this as a real niche situation where the issue is you have a whole bunch of things that are controlled by parent. And what you really want to say is, I want them to have access to the parent, but not those specific child records, but they need to have access to those child records on other records. That's the scenario that this is really trying to address. I would not use restrictions for doing something like, oh, I'm going to just make everything publicly wide available and then remove it through restrictions after the fact. Use it everything should still go OWD, sharing rules, profiles and permission sets, and then this would be like the last kind of ditch item.
Yeah, like, yeah, I agree. By default, I love the example that they gave with tasks and events, that it can be set to private in your org-wide, but if you have access to the account or custom object in this case, you'd still be able to see it. More to come on this, I think, though, Brian. You make some good points. I'd love to know people's use cases for it, and why they're using it out there in the community. So I'll be closely kind of watching how others are doing it before I start dipping my toes in it. All right. Dynamic action. We had dynamic forms, right? We have dynamic actions in the highlight panel, and this really fuzzy screenshot, oh my goodness, gives us the ability for dynamic actions bar. So this is a pilot. So again, lots of pilot things we're talking about today, not you'd have to get in on the pilot in order to start using it. But we're getting a new component for our Lightning pages called Dynamic Actions Bar, where you can tailor all of the actions custom or standard based on your pages, or also using based on visibility, things like that. So currently we have the ability to have all of our actions in that highlight panel, which can be dynamic themselves, all those little buttons, which we got last release. But now it's actually taking that a step further and basically breaking out that dynamic actions bar into its own component for you to be much more flexible on what you're showing your users with your actions. I think that this is pretty cool. I'm excited to be able to utilize it once it becomes maybe beta, maybe GA, but definitely a great addition to our Lightning app. Okay, so I am going to go back just to show you some of the things that we're going to be demoing here. And well, let's just go ahead and get straight into my Salesforce org. So here I am logged into Salesforce on my homepage. And no, you are not seeing things. The font and the colors got an update this release. So I noticed it almost immediately when I started logging into my sandboxes, and I was like, something's different, something's off. And then I realized in the release notes that they made some changes for visibility, which I think is great. One of the other things that they gave us that I was actually surprised is the Einstein search is now generally available. So we've had Einstein search for quite a while, and they just now made it GA. So I thought it was a good time to just kind of revisit it. So here I am in setup on the home tab. You do have to go in and enable it. So if I search for Einstein search, I can see the enable Einstein search. Oh no, I got logged out. So let me get logged back in. One moment. I was sitting on it too long.
Is it MFA?
No, it's not. I just logged in this morning, so that's all right. That's sad.
Man, annoy your admin about setting your session limits.
I know. There we go. Einstein search, enable. So there's 3 components of Einstein search that you can enable, which is personalization, which allows you to get more relative search results for your end users. It doesn't remove anything, but it definitely, if they work in certain areas of the globe and you want to show them, like if they are San Francisco centric, all their searching would give them the San Francisco search results first. It can be actionable. So actionable meaning that it gives you the ability to quickly get to your actions. It gives you the ability to quickly get to other areas related to your accounts, like opportunities, so you can create a new opportunity. You can edit records straight from the Einstein search. It gives you that availability as well. And then the natural language search, which is kind of cool, which gives you information. If you want to actually type in my opportunities closing this month, it'll give you that in a filtered list view through the Einstein search. So one thing that's interesting is I'd love to be able to demo this for you, but I think I have to enable something because I can't click on anything right now. So I'm pretty sure that I have to give myself some kind of permission in order to do this. So I apologize.
You give yourself the
for
license?
That. I don't think that I did. So let's take a look real quick. So let's see. Maybe that's what I'm missing, huh? Is
It may require UE instead of EE.
No, it's
no,
available in
it's
EE.
available.
Okay.
Yeah, let's
I had to
see.
create a permission set, and then that specifically Einstein search license, and then assign that to users.
Okay. Yes, I think you're right, Brian. So check out the release notes. There's also a great video out there for it too. So I'm doing a terrible job demoing this
But it
specific one.
If you're not using it, use it. It is so much easier to find stuff. Having things like you type in like the name of an account, and instead of just hitting enter, it will show up in the list. You can hover over it. It'll give you a preview pane, show you a list of related list items. You can hover over the related list and click on one of the items in the related list. So
Yeah.
you can skip a lot of clicks and page loads to it.
Yeah, so currently you can see when I start typing here, I only get the recently viewed or whatever I'm searching for, right? It gives so much more than just this. So definitely check it out, enable it in your sandbox if you haven't already. It's definitely a productivity tool that you should check out. And check out the video on it because it did a much better job demoing than I am for you today. Okay, so moving on to learning paths. So some user engagement. If you know me, I love user engagement. I love enabling my users to be their most productive in Salesforce. And one of the things we have here is the learning paths. I think that this used to be called something to do with Trailhead, and they rebranded it to learning paths. So you can come in here and tailor this for your end users. So I'm going to click on the go to home link on the bottom, and then you can create and manage your learning assignments. And what you can do is just create a new one. You can link it to a Trailhead module. So I can pull in Trailhead Basics as my module that I want to assign to an app or specific objects. I can assign it to all users. I can assign it just to specific users or groups. I can give it a due date if I want them to do it within a certain period of time or no due date. I find that this would be useful for maybe someone brand new. And if you wanted them to use Trailhead to help them come up the curb with Salesforce, you can curate that learning path for them specifically. So I'll just add that one here. And then the other thing, except for I need to maybe assign it to everyone. The other thing that it does is it does links too, which I thought was really cool and helpful. So we have an internal knowledge base already. So you can just put in, URL. And I wonder if I can just do it like this. You can just put in your URL or your link to your external knowledge base or whatever it might be, give it a title and a description. And again, assign that out to whoever you see fit and save that. And now your learning path is actually going to include that link if you have a knowledge base outside of Trailhead that you want to use, which I know we do, and it's super helpful. So again, your users can see that now in their learning path, all the different things that you've kind of assigned out to them that you think would be useful for them to skill up on some of their Salesforce knowledge. The other one that I'm super excited about is with in-app guidance. There's definitely some cool features like targeted prompts, which is beta, but we also get 3 free walkthroughs permanently now. So before we used to get it as like a trial thing for a limited amount of time, and now we can actually get it forever. And I don't know if this means, I didn't actually get from the release notes if it's active ones or if it's 3 altogether, and you'd have to delete them and maybe create new ones. That wasn't quite clear to me. But I will show you this walkthrough that I have created here. So let me go back to my home, and I'm going to go to my leads. Just kidding. Let me start where my tab was and actually preview this. I'm going to edit it actually. Let's try that first. There we go. So you can see, you can kind of see the setup here. So from my leads tab, I have created a new prompt type, just a floating prompt at the bottom that talks about how they can create a new lead. Super simple to set up. This maybe took me a few moments to do. When I click next, I can then indicate my title, the body, just like we do with our normal in-app guidance, set my buttons, all of that kind of stuff. Then in my next prompt that I create, I would select when they click the new button. So I'm sorry, let me go back one. So I basically am going to, when they click the next button here, or they click new, it'll automatically give them the next prompt. So here I'm letting them know, hey, fill out as much information you can for this lead. Once they click save on this lead, it will give them the next prompt. So it kind of walks them through there. And this one I created as a floating prompt as well. And I added an image to it to show the little goat, Cloudy, for the summer release, and more information listed there. So it's actually really cool and easy to set up, just adding your steps. So if I wanted to add a third step, certainly I can do that. I can just click add step, indicate where I want it to go, click next, give it a title, give it a body, and save, and I'm ready to implement this. Just like any, see if I can trash it here. Just like any of the other prompts, you can also set like when it starts, who it should be assigned to, how long it should be displayed, and all of that sort of stuff. Let's take a look at how this looks for the end user. Let me see if I can remember how to do that. Let's go into preview. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So again, once my user lands on the lead, they would get this message. They say, yeah, I want to set up a new lead. They can click next. It'll give them the prompt to create it. I'm getting information about how I can set this up. You want to be careful about where you put your prompts to make sure it's not covering anything, but also remember that the user can move it around too. So if it gets in their way, they can kind of move it. So I'm going to click save. Because I clicked save, it's now going to give me that third prompt to say, hey, congratulations, you've created this new lead. Here's some next steps that you should take. Or I can create another new lead, and it'll walk me through the process all over again. Yeah, I think the walkthroughs are awesome to give them that guidance straight within the app. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to show real quick is mass actions with split view. So from here, I can be in my list view for leads. I can now have these check boxes. So I can check off the leads that I maybe want to use my drop down for to add to a campaign and add them quickly to my campaign from my split view. So that is a pretty nice feature. Finally, with dashboards, something to do with reports and dashboards here, I'm going to go into my campaign monitoring dashboard. We can now utilize the dashboard and actually download it. I think that's what I want, right? When I download it, it downloads it into a beautiful PNG file. So then I can share that in a beautiful fashion in my my slide deck to share with others if we're talking to executives. Now, why you don't do that live and present straight out of Salesforce, I don't know, but sometimes people want to print it or add it to a slide deck to be able to distribute to others. And with that, that is everything that I wanted to demo today. Again, definitely take a look at release notes. We'll be posting this with all the links to all of the things we talked about today as well. So a little over on our time, but I just want to say thank you to everyone for sticking with me and seeing all of the awesome features that are available to us. Any questions? questions. All right. Well, thanks again for sticking with us. Bye, everyone.
Brian, I have the answer to your question.
Oh, okay.
I have to jump. See ya.
It does, bye Jen. It does just display it in order, Flow Orchestrator. If you have two orchestrations running at the same time, it does not show both work steps at the same time.
Okay.
There is supposed to be a homepage component that would be like what you're talking about, that would show
Oh,
work to do. It's
that
not,
would be nice.
it's not anywhere available in the pilot, so
Pilot.
I don't know when it's going to be available, but yeah,
So it's pilot.
that's right. That's right. So
No,
everything will change within the next year, I'm sure.
I really appreciate the demo because I was trying to glean from it from the screenshots and release notes. And I think I was just missing something where I'm like, I think I understand, but I don't quite understand.
I thought it was more complex than it is. I mean, at least at this stage.
It's like a
but,
meta flow. Is really.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah.
can look at it as a flow with subflows.
Yeah, kind of, right? I mean, right now there's no ability to loop back for work processes. That's also supposed to be coming, so it is still, even though I kind of used that metaphor at the beginning about a linear process, it is still fairly linear, because while you can do parallel work processes, there's still no ability to like loop back if somebody needs to do rework or whatever. So,
Well, you could probably do something along the lines of have it update the record that would end up having it call the orchestrator anew.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure you could work something out like that.
Hobble it together.
Right. So, all right. See you, everyone. See you, Brian.
Bye-bye.